I used to think I was a pretty grounded guy. The kind who didn't jump to conclusions, didn't get rattled over little things. But looking back, maybe that was my biggest blind spot, mistaking numbness for calm, routine for trust. Lana had this work thing. One of those quarterly team celebrations that her company threw to pat themselves on the back for hitting targets or just surviving another fiscal quarter. I'd been to one before. It was half networking, half free booze, and mostly people acting more important than they actually were. Lana, though, thrived in that environment. She called it shaking hands with paychecks. This particular party was at some upscale venue downtown, valet parking, dim lighting, enough modern art to make you feel underdressed even in a tailored suit. I wasn't thrilled about going. I had work in the morning, and honestly, I wasn't in the mood to fake laugh at bad jokes or talk about startup culture with people who thought kombucha was a personality trait. But Lana was insistent. "You should come," she said, adjusting her earrings in the mirror. "It's important to show face. Plus, I really want you to meet my boss. He keeps asking about you." Something about the way she said it, I don't know. She was smiling, but it felt a little too curated, like she'd rehearsed the line. I brushed the feeling off, chalked it up to stress. Lately, things had been tense. We weren't fighting exactly, but something unspoken lingered between us, like a misbeat in a song you've heard 1,000 times. I went anyway, because that's what you do when you're married. You show up. The night played out the way I expected. Small circles of people talking over each other, drinks that looked better than they tasted, and Lana bouncing between conversations like a politician on a campaign trail. She introduced me to a few folks, some names I recognized from her stories, most I didn't. I shook hands, smiled, made polite conversation about things I didn't care about. But even in all that noise, I kept noticing something. Lana was performing. Not just in the usual way, not just smiling bigger or laughing louder, but in a way that felt disconnected. She seemed hyper-aware of herself, like she was trying to control how she came across. There was a tightness to her posture, a stiffness in her smile when she thought no one was watching. And then there was the guy. Tall, well-dressed. Dark gray suit, navy shirt, a tie that probably cost more than my whole outfit. I saw him talking to her twice. Once by the bar, they leaned in close, like the music was too loud. She laughed and touched his arm. It was quick, subtle, but it landed like a gut punch I didn't see coming. When I asked who he was, she brushed it off. "Oh, just one of the newer partners from another department," she said, her voice casual, almost too casual. "He's kind of a jerk, honestly." The rest of the evening went on, but that detail stuck. I'm not a jealous guy, or at least, I didn't think I was, but something about that moment didn't sit right. Later, when we were walking out to the valet, I noticed it. The stain. A faint brown smudge, right at the edge of her white pencil skirt. Almost looked like coffee or maybe foundation. I couldn't quite place it. I reached over and pointed. "Hey, did you spill something?" She glanced down, barely acknowledged it. "Must have been from the Uber," she said quickly. "Seats were dirty." I frowned. "Didn't look like that when we got there." Lana exhaled sharply, like she was tired of the conversation already. "Seriously, Josh? It's just a stain." "And the cologne?" I asked. "What cologne?" She didn't even look at me. "That scent, it's not mine. It's not yours either." She turned toward me then, finally meeting my eyes. There was a flash of something, irritation? Guilt? I couldn't tell. "You're being sensitive," she said, her voice clipped. "God, it's always something with you." That shut me up. Not because she was right, but because the shift was too sudden. Like she was trying to flip the script. Like I was the problem for noticing. We drove home in silence. She kept checking her phone even though she wasn't replying to anything. Screen kept lighting up and she'd glance down, then away quick, like a reflex. I didn't say anything. I just stared out the window, the city lights blurring by. That night, I laid awake next to her, staring at the ceiling. She fell asleep fast, or pretended to. I could hear her breathing steady, could feel the space between us in the bed like a canyon. That scent lingered. Not strong anymore. Just faint enough to haunt me. I tried to reason with myself, maybe it was from someone she hugged, maybe I was overreacting. But the more I thought about it, the more that moment at the party stood out. The guy. The stain. The way she flinched when I mentioned the cologne. And that word again. Sensitive. It wasn't the first time she'd used it lately. Usually when I asked about her schedule, or when she came home late and didn't offer an explanation. It had started popping up like punctuation. A quick way to end a conversation she didn't want to have. That night planted something in me. A seed. And once it was there, it started growing in the silence. Not paranoia, not yet, but something close. The next morning, I woke up before Lana, which wasn't unusual these days. She'd started sleeping later on weekends, Said she needed to catch up after stressful weeks. But what stood out this time was that she wasn't in bed. Her side was cool, the sheets undisturbed, no dent in the pillow. For a second, I thought maybe she was in the bathroom. But her toothbrush was dry. Her sneakers were still by the door. Her sports bra and leggings, the ones she always wore for morning runs, hadn't moved. Jogging? That's what she'd claim when she walked in 40 minutes later. Her hair damp and her expression perfectly neutral. I asked if she ran the trail, and she nodded, unfazed, already reaching for the almond milk. "I'm trying to stay ahead of stress," she said. "You know how tight next week's going to be." I nodded, but I noticed her breathing wasn't elevated. No sweat on her skin, and she hadn't touched those sneakers in weeks. Her phone lit up on the counter. A notification from someone saved as MJ. The preview was just an emoji, the winking face, and then it disappeared before I could see more. That morning, something changed in me. It wasn't dramatic. There was no confrontation, no shouting. Just a quiet shift, a decision to stop pushing away the doubt. Instead, I started observing. I noticed how her wardrobe had changed. It used to be cozy sweaters, joggers, socks with goofy quotes. Now it was blazers on the weekends, jeans that looked surgically tailored, heels even to the grocery store. I asked once if she was going somewhere special. She shrugged. "I just feel better when I dress up." Maybe that was true, or maybe it was for someone else. She started going out more, always with work friends, always short notice. "Sorry, last-minute happy hour. Can't skip this dinner. My team leads in town. I'll be late. Don't wait up." I stopped asking questions, but I paid attention. One night, she left her iPad on the couch. She always locked her phone, but the iPad she forgot. And I noticed her messages sync across devices. I didn't snoop. Not then. But I glanced. The same name, MJ, showed up in her notifications. Sometimes just a dot. Sometimes a photo. Sometimes nothing, just the app name, Signal. I'd never seen her use Signal before. I didn't know what to do with that information. Part of me didn't want to know. The other part, the one that had started counting how often her stories didn't line up, that part had already decided. This was more than a phase. It was a pattern. I started remembering things from the last few months. Things I'd brushed off. There was the canceled anniversary dinner in February. She said work emergency. The next day, she had a necklace I hadn't seen before. When I asked where it came from, she said she bought it as a pick-me-up. That seemed believable at the time. Lana liked to reward herself after big projects. But it didn't come in any box I recognized. Just a plain velvet pouch with no logo. There was the hotel receipt I found folded inside a jacket when I picked it up from the dry cleaner. A hotel downtown, not one she had ever mentioned staying at for work. The date was a Wednesday. I remembered it clearly because that was the night she said she stayed late for a team offsite. She came home at 10:30, said the Uber took forever. The receipt said checkout was 7:45 a.m. the next morning. When I asked casually about that offsite, she couldn't remember the name of the venue. I think it was the Hyatt, or maybe the Westin, somewhere in South Lake Union. I said nothing, just nodded. I was getting good at nodding. The worst part wasn't even the evidence. It was how normal it all looked from the outside. She still asked about my day, still kissed me goodbye in the morning, still sent me articles she thought I'd like. But it all felt like a performance now, a version of our marriage being maintained for optics. And I played along. Why? Maybe because I was scared of what would happen if I pulled back the curtain completely. Or maybe, and this was the part one hated most, I still wanted to believe that she wasn't capable of doing what I was starting to suspect she already had. One Friday afternoon, I left work early. I didn't tell her. I just wanted to go home, crack open a beer, maybe cook dinner. When I walked in, the place was spotless. Too spotless. The couch pillows perfectly arranged. A candle burning, the same kind we used to light before dinner parties. There were 2 wine glasses in the dishwasher. One still had a faint lipstick mark. Not Lana's shade. I opened the trash. A takeout container from a restaurant across town, one we never ordered from. Lana didn't like seafood, but this was a grilled salmon entree. 2 of them. She texted me half an hour later. Working late. Don't wait up. Love you. I stared at the screen for a long time. That was the moment something inside me finally clicked. This wasn't anxiety. It wasn't paranoia. It was instinct. And I'd ignored it for far too long. The Friday she left, it rained. Not unusual for Seattle, but the kind of rain that blankets the city, slow and steady, like the sky's too tired to pour. She packed light, said it was a weekend strategy offsite for work. The phrasing alone made me flinch. Strategy offsite. That was a new one. Lana kissed me on the cheek, not the lips. Her bag was too small for 2 nights, and she left her laptop on the counter, which didn't make sense for a work trip. When I asked about it, she laughed. Too loud. Too quick. Oh my God. I'm such a space cadet, she said, brushing past me to grab it. Thanks for reminding me. I've been all over the place today. I watched her drive away from the front window, pretending not to care, pretending I wasn't counting how many red flags she left in her wake. That night I couldn't sleep. The house was quiet in a way that felt wrong. Lana's presence, even when we were distant, had always filled the space. Now it felt like the walls were holding their breath. Around 9 a.m. Saturday morning, I was sipping bad coffee and scrolling through the news when I got the notification. Front door disarmed. Manual override. The alert came from our home security app. The code used? Lana's. I stared at it, not moving. She wasn't supposed to be back until Sunday evening. I waited a full 10 minutes. No follow-up ping. No camera footage. Nothing. That alone should have been enough. But I needed to see it. I got in my car and drove home like I was chasing something, half expecting to pull up and find nothing unusual. Just Lana, maybe grabbing something she forgot. That's what I told myself. Like I needed to soften the blow before it landed. I parked a block away, not wanting her to hear the engine. When I reached the door, I didn't open it right away. I stood there with my hand on the knob, heart hammering in my chest like it already knew what I was about to see. Inside, the house smelled different. Not bad, just not us. Someone had lit incense. Not one of ours. Something musky, spicy, masculine. A scent that clung to the walls like it belonged. There were 2 wine glasses on the hallway table. One still half full, beads of condensation sliding down the side. A button-down shirt was draped carelessly over the back of the living room chair. Not mine. Slightly wrinkled, soft gray, with a collar too sharp and a brand tag I didn't recognize. And then there was the sound. Laughter. Not Lana's. Not mine. From upstairs. I stood there frozen, listening. It was muffled behind a closed door, our door. The bedroom door. A man's voice, low and amused. Then hers, softer, playful. Int asterisk mate in a way that used to be mine. I didn't go upstairs. Didn't knock. Didn't barge in, demand answers or make a scene. That wasn't who I was, not anymore. Something in me had already shut down like a circuit breaker tripped by one too many sparks. I turned around, walked out, and closed the door gently behind me. The drive back to the loft I'd been renting part-time, my workspace, as I told Lana, was a blur. Rain smeared the windshield, and I didn't bother wiping it away. My mind wasn't even on the road. It was cycling through years of memories, trying to identify the exact moment everything started falling apart. Was it the night she came home tipsy from book club and said they discussed a novel that didn't exist? Was it the afternoon she came back from a conference with a tan line around her ring finger? Or maybe it was before all that, before the lies got clever, when she still made eye contact after an argument. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't call her or confront her or try to catch them in the act. There was no point. She had brought someone into the space we built together. Into the bed we bought with our first tax refund. Into the room where we laughed, argued, forgave. That was the line. And she crossed it without hesitation. I didn't go back home that day. Not to the house we once called ours, not even to pick up clothes or mail. I didn't need to. The decision had already been made, and it was final. Instead, I went to the loft in South Park I'd been renting for freelance work. It was modest. 1 bedroom, open floor plan, brick walls, and tall windows that didn't quite seal properly. It had no dishwasher, no central air, and the Wi-Fi was temperamental. But it was mine, untouched by her. I stayed there that night, stretched out on a second-hand couch with nothing but the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of old pipes. For the first time in weeks, I slept without interruption. When I woke up, the world looked different, not better, but clearer. Sharper around the edges. I brewed a cup of instant coffee, sat by the window, and made a list. Not of revenge. Not even of answers. Just steps. Step 1. Remove my name from everything we shared. I started with the easy things. I logged into the utilities account and changed the email and password. Canceled the internet. Closed the joint Spotify. Deleted the shared calendar. I unlinked our cloud drive, the one where we kept vacation photos and grocery lists and reminders for dentist appointments. I closed the credit card we both used for house expenses. Sent an email to my bank and set a meeting with an advisor. I told him the truth, I'm separating from my wife. I need my accounts protected. He didn't blink. Just nodded and got to work. Step 2. Disappear, but not dramatically. I didn't block her. I didn't post anything cryptic or ask mutual friends for sympathy. I simply stopped being available. Turned off my read receipts. Moved my important files onto a private drive. Wiped the tablet we used to stream movies in bed. Every move was surgical. Emotionless. Quiet. I removed myself like a thread being pulled from a seam, no tearing, no fraying, just the slow undoing of what once held us together. She didn't notice. Or maybe she did, but didn't say anything. Either way, there were no texts. No missed calls. No sudden explanations. Maybe she thought I was cooling off. Maybe she assumed I'd come back and scream or beg or plead. But I didn't. She had crossed a line that made words obsolete. What was left to say after that? I told my boss I'd be working remotely for a while. Took on some extra projects. Spent my evenings reorganizing the loft, replacing old memories with new habits. I picked up books again. Not the kind we used to read together, but the ones I used to lose myself in before we. I cooked simple meals. Cleaned the space until it smelled like lemon and something close to peace. And then I started showing up not emotionally, not romantically, but physically back at the house when she wasn't there. I knew her schedule. Monday to Friday, 9 to 6, sometimes later if dinners came up. I came during the quiet hours, armed with boxes and a duffel bag, taking what was mine in silence. First it was my books, the ones she never touched. Then my records, the ones she thought were too scratchy to be nostalgic. My clothes. My tools. The framed photo from our trip to Monterey, the one she'd left on the shelf even though it tilted forward every time we closed a door. I took the things I loved, not out of spite, but out of respect. I wasn't going to leave behind pieces of myself to be buried under the clutter of someone else's story. Each visit was strategic. I never took too much. I left the spaces just full enough that she wouldn't notice. At least not immediately. The bookshelf grew bare. The closet hung emptier. The coffee mugs dwindled one by one. By the second week, the house was more hers than ours, and I think that was the point. She still hadn't reached out. Not once. I wondered if she'd mentioned me to him, the guy with the gray shirt and the musky cologne. I imagined her making excuses, downplaying me, calling our marriage complicated or pretty much over. The kind of narrative that fits into someone else's arms without resistance. But that was her story to tell. I didn't need to correct it. I wasn't fighting for closure. I was building my own. By the end of that second week, I had one thing left to take. The box. It was an old shoe box tucked deep into our closet behind her stack of handbags. Inside were letters, real ones, the kind written in pen on paper. Notes from our early days. Anniversary cards. A dried flower she once pressed between pages of a book I gave her. I found it right where I remembered. Untouched. I carried it to the kitchen, opened it slowly, and stared at the life we used to have. Then I closed it, placed it inside my bag, and walked out without looking back. I didn't lock the door. Let her wonder when I came. Let her wonder how long I've been gone. Let her feel the silence that follows when someone who truly sees you decides to disappear. Anniversaries used to mean something. In the beginning, we celebrated them like holidays, fancy dinners, handwritten notes, champagne flutes clinking in dim light. Our first year, I took Lana to the coast. She cried when I gave her a silver bracelet engraved with the coordinates of our first kiss. We spent the night wrapped in cheap hotel sheets, whispering promises we meant back then. Now, 3 years later, the only thing I felt when the day came was a vague ache, like pressing on a bruise I forgot was there. By then, I was already weeks into my quiet retreat. Every trace of me had been slowly extracted from our shared life. She hadn't noticed. Or pretended not to. Either way, I hadn't heard a word from her since that morning she packed her overnight bag and left for a trip she never took. But on our anniversary, she came home early. I saw it from the corner of the alley as I was getting ready to make one final run. Her car pulled into the driveway at 4:17 p.m., 3 hours earlier than usual. She stepped out in full makeup, heels clicking against the concrete, hairstyled the way she used to wear it on special occasions. A white blouse tucked neatly into a navy skirt. She looked like a magazine ad for second chances. I didn't move. Just watched from behind a parked van across the street. She unlocked the door with a bounce in her step. I imagined her walking in, expecting roses or a chilled bottle of wine. Maybe a gift on the table. Maybe a note. Some part of her, the part that used to know me, had to expect something. Even if it was anger. Instead, what she found was a half-empty apartment. Gutted, quiet, unfamiliar. My books gone. My tools, my jackets, my guitar, all gone. The spices she never used, the mugs I bought from little coffee shops on road trips, even the chipped bowl I used for popcorn, gone. Only her things remained. Her wine glasses, her throw pillows, her stack of unread fashion magazines. The apartment looked like a stage set. Like someone had already moved out and the new lead hadn't arrived yet. And then there it was, a knock at her door. I wasn't there to see it, but I can imagine the look on her face when she opened it. How quickly her smile must have faded when she saw the courier holding a manila envelope, not a bouquet. Inside, there were no flowers. No notes. Just the divorce papers. Clean. Clinical. Signed, dated, notarized. She called me 3 times that night. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The message had already been delivered. I went out instead. Took myself to a steakhouse she always said was too noisy. Sat at the bar. Ordered medium rare with a loaded baked potato and a glass of red I couldn't pronounce. When the waitress asked if I was celebrating anything, I said, yeah. Something like that. She smiled, probably assumed it was a breakup. I didn't correct her. I ate slow. Watched the people around me, couples leaning into each other, awkward first dates, anniversaries that still held hope. It was like sitting on the outside of a memory, observing a life that used to be mine. When I got back to the loft, I opened a bottle of whiskey I'd been saving for no particular reason. Poured a glass. Sat by the window. Stared out at the skyline with the city lights blinking like they were trying to tell me something. There was a weight that had lifted, not joy, not closure, but something like relief. Like finishing the last page of a book you didn't enjoy but felt obligated to finish. The next day, I returned to the house one last time. Not for my things, I had everything I needed. But to leave something behind. I placed one final box on the kitchen table. Inside were 2 things, the empty frame that once held our wedding photo and the cork from the first bottle of wine we ever shared in that house. I didn't leave a note. She'd know what it meant. She messaged me 2 days later. 1 sentence, so that's it. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't have an answer, but because I did. Yes. That was it. There were no grand speeches, no late-night fights, no attempts to win each other back. That part of our story was over. And I'd made peace with it not being cinematic. Sometimes endings don't come with thunder. Sometimes they come with silence and a signature. And that's enough. A month passed before I heard from Lana again. At first, there was nothing. Just silence, no texts, no emails, no surprise visits. I thought maybe she'd moved on. Maybe the man in our bedroom had become her new normal. Maybe she was too proud to reach out. Then, late one night, my phone buzzed. Lana, hey. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but can we talk? I didn't answer. 2 days later. Lana, the rent went up. I didn't realize how much you were covering. I might need to break the lease. Still, I said nothing. I had no interest in negotiating logistics with the woman who had rewritten the rules behind my back. Eventually, the messages became less about the apartment and more about regret. Lana, I didn't think you'd really leave. I thought you'd be angry but not gone. I was wrong. Lana, I miss you. I read them all. Deleted most. Answered none. I learned from mutual friends, the ones who hadn't quietly drifted away, that the affair had unraveled. Apparently, it fizzled after a few weeks. She thought it would be more. He thought it would be fun. Once it became real, he bailed. Left her with an expensive apartment and silence where comfort used to be. Turns out some of our friends had known. Not all. But enough. A few even tried to warn her. She didn't think you'd really go through with it, one told me over coffee. She figured you'd be upset but come back eventually. She underestimated me, I said. The truth was, Lana wasn't prepared for consequences. She thought the world would bend for her charm like it always had. But now she was alone and the apartment was too quiet and the bills were no longer shared. That was her reality now. And I didn't owe her a rescue. I changed jobs not long after. Moved to a new office, new city sector. Somewhere slower, quieter. Somewhere her name had never been spoken. Got a new phone number. Didn't post about it. Just slipped away from the narrative entirely. I adopted a dog, a lazy mutt with crooked ears who liked sleeping in the sun and wagging for no reason. I named him Murphy. He became my new morning ritual. My roommate. My reason to smile. I started drinking black coffee again, the way I liked it before Lana convinced me to switch to oat milk. I read the paper. Walked the streets without checking my phone. Slept with the windows open. It wasn't about solitude. It was about clarity. There were no more glances at someone else's screen. No more decoding sighs at the dinner table. No more wondering if I mattered. The photos were gone. The ring tucked in a drawer I rarely opened. The memories, when they came, arrived softer. Like echoes from a past life I had outgrown. Peace, I learned, isn't always loud. Sometimes it's in the small things, folding fresh laundry in a quiet room. Laughing at your dog chasing nothing. Baking breakfast with music playing and no one asking you to turn it down. Closure didn't come from confrontation or apology. It came the moment I walked away from the house where she had laughed with another man and never looked back.